This episode of Area Code Batavia is brought to you by Bulldog Plumbing Incorporated. For more information or to schedule an appointment, visit their website in the show notes or give them a call at 630-313-9109. Hey everybody, you're listening to Area Code Batavia, a podcast about what it means to belong in Batavia. Before the school year winds down, I wanted to talk to the superintendent of Batavia Public School, Tom Kim. He started in this role in 2023, and since then has become what I perceive as kind of a fixture of our community. I feel like I see him at a lot of different events and have talked to him a few times, but at this point, I thought it would be really good to just get to know him a little bit. I think we all become acquainted with the decisions and the policies that the school makes and the various things that we might agree with or disagree with or wonder about. Leading a community school system is not easy. Not only are you juggling a range of ages, you got middle school, elementary school, high school, those are drastically different endeavors, but you're also juggling the various perspectives and opinions and expectations of a range of parents. Everyone is extremely passionate about their kids and the education they receive, but those passions aren't always aligned. A lot of people have different ideas about what kind of education their kid should receive. And so it takes a certain kind of person to be able to not just juggle those things and compromise in various ways, but also keep a sharp focus and keep a clear head in the midst of those things. I wanted to know who was the person sort of in charge of leading all of those things. I think the superintendent's job is to make decisions that are best for all of the children in the community. But in particular, I wanted to know how he thought about helping people who might struggle to feel like they belong in Batavia. And so I really appreciated Tom Kim's willingness to sit down and talk. He is very generous with his time. He was willing to meet me over at the Library Resource Center at Batavia High School. So here's my conversation with Batavia Public School Superintendent Tom Kim. All right. Well, I asked my kids if they had any questions for you. Okay. My kids are 7 and 9. Mm-hmm. My 7-year-old I couldn't even keep her focused for 2 seconds to come up with anything. The first, and this is, by the way, going to be the most controversial questions I have for you.
All right.
These 2 questions from my 9-year-old. The first was cafeteria food. What's up with that? So what's your answer to that question?
All right. Answer a question with a question.
Yeah.
Is it better this year than last year?
That's a great question.
Because we switched food services.
Okay.
And that was based on student feedback.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So our business office led the process last year. And one of the things that they did was bring students along for taste testing.
Yeah.
And they also kind of reached out to different student groups asking for their feedback on what they liked and what they didn't like and things of that nature about the provider we had and what they would want to see in the future. Uh-huh. So our decision that was made and recommended to the Board of Education was based on that kind of feedback we were getting from students, along with some of the logistical things that we have to take into consideration, right? Like mandatory requirements and pricing and all that stuff. But from what I've seen and what I've personally tasted, I feel like
trending upward.
It's trending upward.
That's right. But I think for him, it's like higher stakes because he gets one hot lunch a week. Mm-hmm. And it's just based on whenever I just can't with the lunches, with making lunches. I'm like, this is going to be my break and you guys get a treat. And every now and then he's like, oh, it was not. I want it every other day. It's always grass is always greener thing. So I think that's why it's like it needs to be on point every day just in case he's actually going to utilize it.
Yeah. I guess, there's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
And always welcome to take that feedback because these agreements are not lifelong agreements with the district.
I'll get more information from him and email it to Holly and she can send it to you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
The other, I want to make sure I get this right because he texted it to me literally on the way here.
I love it.
From his phone. I don't know if that's allowed at school or not, but he did that. He said, ask him if the same amount of money goes to each school. Ooh. Like I said, that's it. That's the most controversial question you'll get.
And this is your 11-year-old?
My 9-year-old.
Your 9-year-old. Your 9-year-old.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's a great question. The answer would actually be no. They do not.
Okay. Yeah.
The way buildings receive their funding is based on several different metrics.
Mm-hmm.
One, it starts with a basic per pupil. Here's how much per pupil we give in dollars to each building.
Yeah.
But then after you go past that, it depends if that building has any special programming that another building may not have. So you're obviously investing more in whether that program requires certain kind of furniture or how much staffing goes into it, supplies. If you think about busing services, some of our, like we have 6 elementary buildings, but some of our elementary buildings have more buses than others.
Yeah. There's different sizes,
total variety,
different needs, all that. Yeah. I sort of knew the answer to that question because I just watched the episode of Abbott Elementary where they're trying to get money from the school system. And it's like so arbitrary. It's framed as like the most arbitrary thing in the world. And so I sort of knew, I'm sure it's not that arbitrary here, but I knew that it wasn't the same.
Yeah. No, it is not the same, but it's built by starting off with a base formula.
Okay.
And then from there, you kind of add in based on what the individual specific needs are for that building.
Got it. Yep. Cool.
Wow, that's a great question.
Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah. I said, oh, good one. And then he said, yes. All right. Well, you have worked in a lot of different communities. I was looking at your LinkedIn page.
Okay.
It's just like a list of different communities that you've worked in. And I'm curious, like, what you found to be the same in every community that might be interesting. But then also, like, what is different specifically about Batavia from your experience having worked in Batavia?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think one of the things that is by far in every district and community I've worked in that's similar is everyone is passionate about their kids, right? Mm-hmm. Whether you're talking about the staff, the administration, even the boards of education, parents, every place I've been in cares so deeply about their kids, cares about the traditions, cares about the programs that their kids belong to, cares about, the academic success of their children, right? And the programming that the district's had. So that is, by and large, the biggest thing that I've experienced and seen in that regard. Something that I think is unique is this. I feel like I have been very blessed and honored to have served in great districts. They're all pretty different and unique from each other. Mm-hmm. But I would also say those were amazing experiences that I had there. Yeah. One of the things, though, that I feel is somewhat unique to Batavia is the volume of community that exists here.
Volume is interesting.
The volume.
You mean in terms of size or loudness level?
Volume by size. Like
dense.
In my transition, I was immediately like populated with meet and greets from Chip-In, Beefy, the Batavia Ministerial Association, the Batavia Women's League of Voters. Every group, I got a chance to connect to the city, to the park district, to the library. Yeah. I just think, in some of these organizations that I was able to connect with, are pretty usually like standard in every school district and community, right? Like connecting with the city, right? Yeah. The superintendent definitely wants to have a great relationship with their city or the cities that they serve. But like when you talk about Chip-In, United Way, our education foundation, I'm going to extend to Kiwanis and Rotary. Like these groups are so involved and so connected to our people, to our kids. And I just feel like every one of those organizations I mentioned exists in some way, shape, or form in every community that I've been a part of. Mm-hmm. But the level of connectivity, the connective tissue between those organizations to our school district is really strong here. Yeah. And I don't know if people realize that.
That's interesting.
Because everyone I talk to around here has lived here generationally I'm fairly new to Batavia. I've lived here for the last 15 years. And I'm like, I hear that that's a lot. New? Yeah. But, there are people that I've met, families or parents where they're a little bit newer, within the last 2 to 3 years having moved to our community and would actually concur with what I said, like, oh yeah, it's amazing. Just like, it's just different from where I used to live. Yeah. Right. I grew up in Skokie. And I think about some of these organizations like Chip-In and what they're doing for kids and families that might have some transitional needs, moving into our community, or just families that are getting struck by hard times that they didn't plan for. There's just like an immediate rallying of support. Yeah. Where I grew up, we grew up pretty poor. My mom raised 3 boys on her own. And it's like, we were on our own, or we were also reliant on relatives to some extent, or me and my brothers working the moment we became age eligible.
Wow.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
what age was that?
I started working when I was 14.
14.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope this isn't self-incriminating. Maybe there's a statute of limitation, but I do some cash stuff when I was in junior high.
Of course, yeah. Who doesn't?
Working for my friends' dads, or parents, with their businesses and stuff. But for the most part, when I turned 14, I started working.
Okay.
But that's when you talk about that unique aspect of the community here and our school district. I just think that would probably be the first thing that stands out to me.
What do you think is the reason for that?
I think it's just so multifaceted in just that there's so many people that are a part of the community that believe in that. I'm going to start with somebody that I work with and see on a daily basis, Amy Nelson. She's our community outreach coordinator at the district office. Amy is also a generational family of Batavia, right? Yeah. And her husband's a teacher in our district, and the connections that she has and just the servant leader kind of mindset that she has is just incredible. I think about even when I meet with Mayor Schelke and just, how he talks about the history of the city and the community. Right. When I see what the Park District is doing and trying to bring a lot of celebrating of just the agencies, during the holidays, the Christmas holiday time, they did a little luncheon to all the agency partners and said, hey, you and your teams come, we're grilling out food and, we just want to break bread together. Like I said, I've never had that happen in any of the other districts I've been a part of.
It's really interesting because there is often a tension between that sort of community, a community that is passionate about itself because it's made up of people who've been here forever, between that and inclusivity, including people who haven't been here forever. So for myself, I started this podcast partly because I've been here 7 years now. And so I started this podcast a year ago. I felt pretty new,
Sure.
And there's just this feeling of I don't know, do I belong here kind of thing? And it's something I've been exploring over the last year. What's interesting to me about that is you are also sort of a transplant here.
Yeah.
And I would expect a lot of students in the school system are that way. I'm curious how you think about making sure the students feel included in this community when it is so occupied by there is so much of that volume you talked about is people who say actively and are proud of having been here for years. That can have an inherent impact on people who haven't. How do you think about that?
Oh, that's an interesting point. I think sometimes part of it is having the ability to maybe make those connections for people. Yeah. Connecting people to organizations, causes, creating purpose. Yeah. Some right now, for me, as we continue to find ways to try and increase that sense of belonging in our district, right? Or some of the initiatives we're working on just trying to increase the amount of participation we have with our students in extracurricular activities, for example. Yeah. Those kinds of things. You have that kind of a project or mission. It helps you then see wait, maybe we can find a way to bring in the chamber and help connect people. And, to your point, Richard, it's helping us elevate different individuals in our community. Some are in the district. Sometimes they're just people from the community that you've been able to connect with and highlight those stories. I think that's another great avenue. I think, when you look at that question you asked, I think a lot of it is about that humanity aspect of calling people in. You see them, you talk to them, walk in the hallways. The thing I used to love as a building principal that we always pushed in our buildings that I ever led as a building leader was everybody, we'd do our best to just reach out to the kids, check in on them. Hey, how you doing during a passing period? Or really just taking a moment to let kids get to know you while you get to know them. Right. And so when you talk about some of the students or adults in our district who might be a little bit newer to the BPS community, right? I think that's really important. And I think there's, while I think we have really good things that we do, I think there's ways to continue doing more of those things, how you celebrate even. That's one thing I love is I think we're a little bit humble in what we do or do not praise about our district and our community. Yeah. And the reason why I say that is one of my college teammates, when I was transitioning into the district a year and a half ago over the summer, he and his family happened to also at the same time move to the Batavia School District.
Okay.
From Chicago.
Yeah.
And if they are listening to this, they know exactly who I'm talking about. But on their journey of finding a new home and a new community as they're moving out of the city, they passed on a few communities that are highlighted and hailed to be some of the best in Illinois, if not the country, right? And I won't name any, but they told me about how their journey looked. And then they looked into the Fox Valley region. They looked at a couple of towns and communities that are great communities, but they said they didn't feel right. It wasn't for them. And then their real estate agent said, you know what? Let's try Batavia. There's a few really nice homes available in Batavia that I think you might like. Good neighborhoods, very tight-knit community. And they said the moment they kind of started peeking around, they were like, this is it.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think that's when you think about just like, there are just so many multiple facets about what we do that people don't know about because they had no idea where Batavia was.
They said, this is it. Why?
They felt the community aspect.
Yeah.
They kind of, I think that they told me they went out to eat or something like that in town and got a feel, just got a feel for it.
That's cool.
And then of course, him and his wife did some homework and digging around on the school district itself too. Yep. They've got several children in our district now.
Awesome.
So going back to why I share that story, they're born and raised in Illinois, but didn't know about Batavia.
Right.
And so one of the other factors I gave you is like, we have one of the highest rates of dual credits being issued to our kids here at Batavia High School in the state of Illinois. We're one of the tops.
What does that mean?
So it means like kids who are taking certain classes, if their teachers have a master's degree in that particular area, Waubonsie Community College works with us so that the kids that take that class are also being taught by someone who's kind of like on staff with Waubonsie. And there's like the ability then for that class to count as a college credit.
Got it.
It's a big initiative that's pushed through the state of Illinois. And for us, what it ends up being is like kids who take those certain types of classes are already building college credits if that's what their game plan is, as they leave BPS.
Right.
And so we have some kids who have left and gone to college as sophomores, saving on a full year's worth of tuition.
Yeah.
And so when you compare that, the statistic I'll give you is almost 50% of all of our graduates last year experienced an AP or dual credit class.
Okay.
Comparably speaking to even some of the top-notch high school districts in the state of Illinois, we're right there in that team picture with them.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to like your original question about like how do you like make sure people feel like there's a fold in for everybody here, I think part of it is like sharing like what do we have here available to you, and then if we're missing something, let's figure out a way to create that so you have a space.
Yes.
One of the things that I know our district committee on stipends worked on was supporting the growth of our e-gaming club. So, and that's an emerging area. It's been growing so fast. That club is already like booming with over 30 to 35 kids coming regularly to participate. And these are kids.
High school?
Yeah. And these are kids who are not in any other club or sport or activity.
Okay. Yeah. That's
right.
Cool.
Like you found a niche for kids to find a community.
Yeah.
And even though it's gaming, like it's still something they can do socially. They come to the same space together to do that together.
Totally.
So
what was the first time you felt like you belonged in Batavia?
Oh, yeah. The first time I felt like I belonged, I will probably say...
You've been here how long?
This is finishing my second year here.
Got it.
So I've been here just a little under 2 years.
Yeah.
I would say actually coming right into the buildings and district offices actually before I started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. My predecessor, I'm very grateful to how supportive she was during my transition.
Okay.
Dr. Hitchens really took care of me, introduced me to people, gave me a lot of the good background on the district and the history of the district. She had been here and hired as a teacher in the 90s and worked her way up through the ranks here.
Yeah.
And I could just tell by the way she spoke about the district and her experiences here, just like that love for it.
Yeah.
And it kind of rubbed off onto me just sitting down and meeting with her. And then when I went around the buildings and was able to meet with, various people, Todd Swanson, the union president at the time, we didn't talk any shop or business. We just ate food together and just learned about each other, and that was kind of the similar experience going everywhere. The kids, I think that was actually probably the most connective group of people that really made me feel along were the students here. Every building I went to, the kids were just amazing. And when I got to meet with some of the principal advisory groups, just the dialogue, engagement, openness, it was so good. Yeah.
Maybe you can help me with a weakness of mine. A weakness, a deficiency. I'm not sure what the right word is. I'm terrified of teenagers. I'm terrified of kids that aren't my kids in general.
Yeah.
Did you ever have that problem?
No.
You have to just be made for it, I think.
Maybe, but it's funny because even I think that happens in education because I've had, teachers sometimes express to me like, oh my gosh, I could never go to the high school. Those kids are, those are big kids, right? Like
this is, and
vice versa.
Walking to this. So right now we're in the high school library resource center. What is it called?
Yeah, this is a media center. Yeah, the library resource center.
Library resource center, which by the way, I was asked by the librarian to say it is National Library Day.
That's right. That's right.
We want to plug that. Yeah. It's super important, especially right now. I think it's really important to support your libraries and education and all of those things that we take for granted. They were telling me, I'm sorry, this is way off track, but I'm remembering that I wanted to talk about this. They were telling me just a minute ago that this is like kind of the heart of the high school. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, their space is utilized for so much, and it's just a different space than what it was when we grew up, right?
Yes.
Like you go there, you learn how to do research, or you quietly read.
It was pretty auxiliary. Growing up.
Yeah. Sometimes it was also a place like I don't want to go to the library,
right?
You get shushed all the time.
That's true, yes.
Right?
Yes.
But I think now you see this as a space that's really like the heart, right? Because you're bringing in different fairs or activity groups. You're bringing in opportunities for kids to explore and find books or other forms of literacy that interest them. Yeah. I think it's a great place for our students to connect with each other. I've seen the BHS staff and team here do some pretty cool things that are pretty inclusive events that will bring different groups of students together in this space. Yeah. And, I think that's really important. It almost transforms itself into a place that's a good, safe space for kids.
Yeah, that's cool.
Absolutely.
Today's episode of Area Code Batavia is brought to you by Bulldog Plumbing. I don't know if you knew this, but Batavia has what is considered to be hard water. As a result, a lot of Batavia residents have a water softener installed in their house to solve some of the problems that come with hard water. We got a water softener soon after we moved into the house because we started noticing that there was a lot of buildup from the hard water. It was messing with our appliances. Our coffee maker started having weird flakes in it. It was strange. So we had to get that taken care of with a water softener. If you've had a water softener for more than 5 years, it's probably time for a tune-up. Bulldog Plumbing is offering a special $80 water softener tune-up that includes water testing and system optimization. So if you need a water softener tune-up or any other services, call Bulldog Plumbing at 630-313-9109 or click the link in the show notes. That's Bulldog Plumbing. Reliable, honest, local.
Okay, so back to the question of how to not be afraid of teens. What do you tell those teachers? What's the secret?
I always just say they're kids. They're just a little bit older, a little more, maybe wider range of interests and such developmentally. But, they're all just kids still at heart.
What's crazy is that I was a youth pastor for several years.
Oh.
But I think it was such a bad experience for me that it actually traumatized me a little bit. I'm doing therapy. I'm just full therapy now. But I think that's some of it for me is I was like, oh man, it wasn't even the kids that traumatized me. It was just like the nature of the job and how ambiguous and weird it was. But I think it left me with some baggage a little bit.
I wonder, it must have been hard because when you're in that kind of role, you kind of carry the weight of everybody, right? Because it's all coming to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. And a lot of different expectations for that sort of role too.
Yeah. Yes.
Which you must face a lot of different expectations for not only what a superintendent does, but what the education system does. There are a lot of different opinions. And you mentioned at the top of this, parents are extremely passionate about their kids. Yeah. That can be read in two different ways in terms of positive or negative. Yeah. I don't know if it's ever really a negative, but it can often have negative impact in terms of like people, they're mad at you for whatever reason. And it may be the polar opposite reason someone else is really happy with you. Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with the drastic range of expectations that are put on the education system locally here?
I think you have to really start whenever people are wanting to engage with me with that kind of focus in mind. Yeah. My biggest thing, I always just keep at the forefront of how I'm engaging and my level of curiosity to the conversation is just keeping in mind they're the parent. Their job is to advocate for their child.
Yeah.
No matter what the request, whatever the situation is, I always just try to remember, hey, they're coming in doing what they're supposed to do.
Right.
Right. And it's my job and those that work with me to make sure that, hey, do we have a situation here where we have a systems issue? Do we have a situation where, you know what, the system was all right. There was a human error here and something that happened, right? Or is it something where maybe we're missing something and what did that solution look like? Or how do we problem solve that, right? Because you're right. Sometimes when you hear like even just from one group or individual parent and then another, and it's like if you took care of both of their concerns, you'd actually be potentially upsetting the other parent because it took something away from that, right?
Yes.
And so that's why I think the best approach as an organizational leader is you have to kind of determine and understand what the actual issue is. And so for me, overall, I mean, everybody I've engaged with when concerns are brought to me, I feel like people are advocating for their child. And I love that and respect that. As a parent myself, you know, who have kids in school, like I get it.
Have you always wanted to be a superintendent specifically?
No.
Or, okay, what did you want to be?
I wanted to be exactly what I was when I was at Elgin High School. I was a teacher and a coach.
Okay, interesting. You went from Skokie to Elgin?
So Elgin High School was the first job in education I ever held.
Yeah. What made you want to get into education?
I probably, without any doubt, it was my teachers and all my coaches, all the adults that influenced me growing up.
In Skokie?
In Skokie. But even like when I think about some of the teachers I had in Chicago, I'll never forget Miss Benitez. You know, she was my elementary school teacher at Budlong before we moved to Skokie. There was just a lot of influential educators all along my journey. Even Dave, one of the maintenance people at Old Orchard Junior High, like he was such a kid magnet and he was great. And he always like, I don't know, like I felt nice when he would check in. He's like, how you doing, buddy? You know, and I'm like, I'm all right. And he's like, hey, come on, let's go shoot some hoops. It's just like, I don't know. There is a power in adults connecting with kids.
Yes.
You know, and well, you know the old saying. It's like, you never know when you're going to change someone's day.
100%.
Just saying hi.
Yeah. I went to public school and I think a lot about the impact specific teachers had on me. And it is almost very random. It's dependent on the individual student and how it syncs up with the teacher. You literally never know. But it does make a huge impact when it does hit, you know?
Yeah.
I am going to ask you a point blank question that I feel like is a weird question, but so many people have told me that you have a great story. Oh. That phrase has come up multiple times. And I can't figure out how to get to that without asking, what is your story?
All right.
What do you think they're alluding to? And then we can
I don't know. Just that I like to cook. I love cooking, by the way. Well, I mean, I just opened it a little bit with my answer to your question just a moment ago.
Yeah.
I'm the oldest of three boys, second generation. My mom immigrated to the country, to the United States in the early 70s.
Okay. Where?
South Korea.
Okay.
And so
my wife's mom did as well.
Oh, yeah. Because I remember meeting your family at JVN.
Or you talked to Jennifer about it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And so, you know, you probably have then for your own context, like some understanding of what that looks like, right? My mom was the second youngest child of a big family, a lot of siblings.
Did you have a father as well?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I did.
The
interesting story is it was kind of an arranged marriage.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And my mom once told me a story about that, and my mind was just blown away. Yeah. I had no idea and how that happened. But, you know, growing up, we moved around a little bit within Chicago, had a couple of minutes in the suburbs, then back when we moved to Colorado for a little bit, then moved back to Chicago.
Wow. Okay.
And then eventually moved to Skokie. You know, I think a part of what it drove that is, in particular, was just feeling like my mom especially wanted a better educational experience than at the time. The joke I like to give people is when I was going to be moving into, I think it was 5th grade, they had told my mom that they were going to advance me like 2 grade levels in math and English. And I think my mom, if I remember my memory serves me correctly, was just like, you know, she told me, Youngnam, my Korean name's Youngnam. She's like, oh, I love you, but you're not that smart. And she was so right.
She knew better?
She knew better. She gave mom's honest love.
Yeah.
But we moved to Skokie. My parents wound up getting divorced soon after that.
Okay.
And, whatever happens in life, right?
Yes.
And I think given what we knew, my mom made absolutely the right decision. I was very supportive of that as the oldest of 3 boys at a tender age of like 12 or whatever I was, something like that. But
Isn't it weird that as kids, we feel like we have to evaluate our parents' decisions as if we could possibly have any real knowledge or input into what they're going through?
Yeah, I know. It's interesting, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, my mom leaned on me a little bit too, and that that relationship my mom and I had helped. Not help. Maybe help's not the right word, but I grew up fast, and then so there's things you go through in life and those kind of dynamics, and then
makes you who you are.
Makes you who you are.
Totally,
exactly. Yeah. And my mom, when her job moved from Lincolnwood, her company was on the Lincolnwood-Skokie border. She worked in a manufacturing plant kind of environment, but they moved to West Chicago out this way.
Okay.
Her English was really limited. She couldn't find any other jobs.
Yeah.
So she stayed with the company and so would drive from Skokie back and forth every single day, right, while we were growing up. So that was kind of like the lifestyle for me and my brothers growing up. And then
did you struggle with belonging during all of this? You're moving to a lot of different places. Yeah. You're sort of a first generation what's the phrase? First generation immigrant? Is that right?
I think I'm technically second generation.
Second generation.
My mom
immigrant.
would have been the first generation since she was foreign born.
But people would notice that, I guess. Yeah. And how did that affect your ability to belong in all of these communities?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like there's such an emphasis on maintaining language abilities these days, right? Which I love world languages. I love just learning and knowing it. But when I was a kid, my cousins used to tease me about the fact that I used to speak Korean really well, and then I started going to school. And my mom really wanted me to speak English. That assimilation idea, right? And so looking back, it's I wish I would have kept that, but.
So you sort of lost the Korean a little bit.
Lost that, right? So you end up walking in these weird worlds because my older cousins were all, a lot of them might have been born in Korea and then immigrated when they were younger. And some of, their parents helped them maintain that because of that, right? Or whatever. And it kind of gets weird because, my mom was really young as the sibling pecking order goes. And so a lot of my cousins were much older. My relatives, like uncles and aunts, were a lot older. So not knowing Korean made it sometimes hard to connect my aunts and uncles.
Yeah. So you're sort of in both worlds, but not feeling totally belonging in both.
Yeah.
In either.
And there was also just some wealth components.
Okay.
My mom did not make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so growing up like that, me and my younger brothers, my mom did the best she could.
Yep.
I'll tip my cap to her as a parent now. I don't know how she did that. When we lived in Skokie, I had friends who also probably didn't have a ton of money at home, but I also had friends who came from families that had great economic stability. And it was awesome though, because I feel like I made a really good network of friends who just cared about being good to each other, like friends. And I grew up in an interesting community too. Skokie is our school district that I grew up in. And I believe it's still this way today. It was a majority district.
Yeah.
So you really see tons of both economic diversity, religious diversity, ethnic diversity. There's just so much.
Right.
When you actually leave that school environment into the real world, didn't actually reflect the rest of the real world.
Totally.
Diversity was not as vastly wide in range as that.
I experienced that growing up in the South. I went to just a small town in Alabama. I went to the one high school in that town, and it was sort of evenly split between black and white students.
Yeah.
It was so valuable to me.
Yeah.
It was unbelievably valuable to be in that environment. But you're right. The minute I got out, I went to a little Bible college in Florida, all white people in general. The church thing is youth pastor of the white churches. And so it is very hard. And then moving up here, it's less diverse than Alabama. I sort of miss that sometimes, but Yeah. It's impactful and it's different, you know?
Yeah. I don't know what specific aspect people tell you about my story.
Right. It is an interesting question. What do they have in mind exactly? But I think a lot of what you talked about is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Because
maybe that's what it is. My mom, my senior year, was diagnosed with cancer.
Oh, wow.
And so, we went through that. The network of relatives that my mom has, or that we had as a family, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, just great human beings. They always took care of us throughout our life. I'm probably, when I reflect, thinking that in my life, I know about the hands that helped me get to where I am at this point in my life.
Yeah.
I got to imagine there's probably twice the amount of hands that I have no idea that helped me behind the curtain of getting to me where I'm at now and supporting, me and my brothers and my mom, so it's like one of those kind of situations.
Yes.
When I decided to go to college, I was thinking far and wide and very close. And at the end of the day, I wanted to go into North Park College. I played football there. Mike Liljergren was our head coach and great guy, great professors there. She's no longer with us, but one of my dearest mentors, advisors, who eventually became my friend, was Nancy Berggren. And just such a great experience. But I stayed close enough to also be around my mom, family, to that extent. Those were some really great kind of experiences, I think, that helped shape some things with me. And then I went to officer candidate school for the Marine Corps.
Okay.
That was a pretty defining moment, I think, in terms of my mom will tell people, my wife loves telling this story to people, but my mom always told her Tom was always a leader when he was a kid. I could always see it. But the thing is, my mom realizes I also had really bad moments as a leader, as a kid, I wasn't always listening to people, or I said, do it my way. Or if you ask my brothers.
Yes. Yeah.
But
I feel like if you want to be a leader growing up, you definitely start bad. That's just the way it is.
Right?
Leadership is not something that you inherently are good at really ever, I don't think. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But
I think
you have to step in it a few times.
It's like anything else.
Yeah.
You might have these skills that can go good. It can go, go really well, or it can break bad, right?
Yeah.
But life and who you surround yourself with helps kind of shape that clay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Valuable lessons learned there. But then it's when I became a teacher and a coach that that next phase of life, I got surrounded by just really great people, influential, both colleagues and administrators that worked with me, and you end up where you're at today.
Yes. Was there ever a moment that you questioned your decision to go into education?
So when 9/11 occurred, there were a couple people I was thinking about that I had done my boot camp training with. And after 9/11, I was really at this crossroads of do I, should I go back? And in 2003 in U46, the 2003-2004 school year, the district had uncovered this massive deficit that surprised them. So there were huge reduction in force notices going on in that spring.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I was on the verge of so I was pink slipped. And my principal, Mr. Smiley, at the time was
great principal name.
Yeah, right. He was not Mr. Smiley. Mr. Smiley was a tough guy. But, he was working really hard to try and make sure that I'd be brought back to not just the district, but to Elgin High School. And I just remember he wasn't sure, though, what was going to happen, right? Okay. It was a huge deficit. Wow. But so I was teetering at the 11th hour about what to do. I mean, I remember, I think they notified me first week of June or last week of May that they would be bringing me back to Elgin High School.
But you were just okay, I guess that's my sign.
So maybe that was a sign. Yeah. Because honestly, Richard, maybe a week or two later than that, I think I would have been out of education.
Wow. Forever, you think?
Maybe. I was very passionate about my experience, brief as it was, with the Marine Corps. The experience there was something that I thought about a lot. When you had asked me, did I always know I wanted to be a superintendent? I said, no, I want to be a teacher and a coach, right?
Yeah.
One of the things the reason why I can tell you this is my senior year English teacher asked us all to write a letter to ourselves 5 years out. And she told us, Miss Cole, and she said, I will send these back to you. Address it to where you want it to go.
I love that.
And she did it.
Yeah.
I will never forget that. And in my letter to myself, I said, have you gone in the Marine Corps? Did you end up playing football in college? Are you a history major? And are you teaching and coaching? I can't believe I thought about those things.
Did you end up playing football in college?
I did. I played at North Park. Yeah.
You did all the things.
I literally did everything I was thinking about
That's
at the
crazy.
time as a senior in high school.
How did I did not do all the things I wanted to do in high school. How did you pull that off?
I don't know. I mean, it's just the way life worked out, I guess. I mean,
all those hands, all those invisible
hands, I think are really at play. My mom, that was a big thing too, because I wasn't sure how much more do I need to focus more on work when I was in college than playing football.
Yeah.
But my mom made it out okay from her cancer. So
good.
She's still with us today.
Awesome.
But when I got to Elgin, I loved it. I got hired with a class of new teachers that we just bonded, and I actually married one of them. I was their officiant.
Yeah. I served as their officiant.
I was their officiant for their wedding. It was such a great bond of people. We were really tight, and the kids and the community. In fact, actually, one of my former football players is getting married next month and invited me to the wedding, my wife and I. So, I don't know. It was a great experience. One that I never thought, Richard, I'd leave anything for.
Yeah.
But again, great mentors. My athletic director, Art Roman, who I just hold in the highest regard, really talked to me about my future as a leader, this and that. And yeah.
That's cool. What keeps you up at night?
Oh, a few things. I don't sleep a lot. I think by nature, a lot of us in education are people who want to fix problems for people, right? And so when you're faced with things that might be a little bit more out of your control, you're faced with things that you do want to fix, but it's going to take, so then how do I strategically lead that with a group of people to see the vision the same way, right? Or inspire them to follow. Leaders are only leaders when people follow you. You got to look back and make sure that people are coming with you.
Right.
And so I think those are some of the things, because sometimes I just don't feel like I'm good enough. And so that's why I've always operated from the idea, I may not be the sharpest person in the room, so I use my work ethic as the way I'm going to make sure I belong at that table, if that makes sense.
What do you mean by your work ethic?
I'm going to outwork you. I'm going to out hustle you. When I was a student athlete, I wasn't the fastest kid, nor was I the strongest kid.
Yeah.
When we were doing 40-second drills from sideline to sideline, I'm not going to be the last one. I'm going to be able to keep going when you want to quit.
That is when I was asking, how did you pull all of that off? That was a little bit my hunch, was pure force of will, I think is part of it, because you're talking about a guy who's been in Marine Corps, a guy who's come from an immigrant background. It all adds up to this person who, if you're going to even survive, it's going to be, you've got to do the thing, do all the things, which I struggle with, honestly. Yeah. But it makes sense.
But I think that's why when I got into education, I had a lot of people fill the void of a good father figure role.
Okay.
I talked about Art Roman. Art Roman, as speaking for me as an adult, was probably one of the people I think about when it's what it looks like in understanding what it means to be a father and a husband, and also balancing a career around that. If you know anyone who hears this that knows Art knows what I'm talking about. And then just along the way, you're seeing different leaders and being exposed to leadership styles with people who I've admired my entire career. But at the same time, it's as a good teammate, I don't want to let them down, you know? And I think those are some of the intricacies about what makes people tick. Coming into the district, our opening day message, which I think went 25 minutes longer than I promised everyone. I talked about my biggest thing in the district coming in. One of the things I said was just be a good teammate. That's an expectation. Can we be a good teammate?
Yeah.
Will you run through walls for each other? Will you make sure you have yourself so held accountable that you don't want to let your team down? You don't want to let your teammates down. Yeah. And I don't care what position we have. Yeah. We're all important to that work.
Not to do your PR for you, but I think that's a big piece of why you're such a good fit for Batavia. We talked about Batavia having this high volume, dense, tight-knit community in some ways. I think so many people think in that way. Just from my experience talking to people, Dennis Piron, that was the theme of the conversation, was we create teams that care about each other, and we're doing this for the sake of the team, not for winning, but because we love each other and we don't want to let each other down. And that's the motivation. I think of Chip In Batavia. I talked to Joanne Spitz. It's very much these are people in our community. Yeah. We cannot let them down. And so I feel like there is really this coherent theme among people and leaders in particular in Batavia, where it is really less about, I want to win, I want to be seen as a success, I want to accomplish such and such thing. It's more about, I don't want to be the person who lets these people down.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to tell you, I really wasn't sure if I wanted to apply for the job. I didn't apply until the 11th hour before they closed the posting. When I was approved, I had taken my family to the Harlem Globetrotters playing, doing their thing over at the, it used to be this, not the Sears Center, Allstate Arena, in Rosemont.
Yeah.
But so we were there, but I'm just sitting there with my family, and on the way up, one of our teachers at Batavia High School, a math teacher, he comes up and he goes, "You're Tom Kim." And I go, "I am, and who are you?" He's like, "I'm one of the teachers at Batavia High School. I just wanted you to know we're really excited to have you. You're going to love it. I don't want to interrupt your family time anymore, but welcome to Batavia."
Awesome.
My wife saw the exchange. She was sitting right next to me, and I could almost see, like, she might have been almost tearing. She was like, "Oh my God, I think you've made the right choice. This is definitely a sign." I mean, there's so many people on staff throughout the district who are part of that greeting committee, individually reaching out to me, individually talking to me, or, things of that nature, inviting me to talk to their programs, to their student football programs, one of them, Chris Owens and the whole fine arts department has been so welcoming and bringing me into their fold too. So
that's cool. To you, what does it mean to belong in Batavia?
Well, if I wanted to define it, I want to say that it's about helping each other and supporting each other and loving each other. Not to sound cheesy, not to sound really corny or cliche, but I think there is, when I say that, I mean it from like a spirit of humanity kind of thing. I'll give you another example of what I mean. In my research prep for interviewing with the district, with the Board of Education, I had watched about a year or two's worth of board meeting. I found it really interesting how unified the board came out during pandemic situations in talking about how the district was going to move forward, what they had to vote on from the administrative recommendations. And granted, I know it wasn't all perfect. And I know that there were a lot of differing point of views. Yeah. I get it. Yeah. Trust me. I was in HR at the time that this was happening, right, in my district where I was working. So I understand. But it was at a time, if you remember, when you could look across the state of Illinois and see boards of educations not all behaving very well. And I just was really impressed with how the board conducted itself. That was one of the things I looked to, and I just thought, like, I felt like, to me, they understood the gravity of the situation. Yeah. And that it wasn't an opportunity to destroy each other, but rather we know there's a bigger mission here. I don't know. I could be off about that, but but that's what the impression I got. Yeah. It's just being genuine and authentic. People around here, no matter what your role is, seem to be willing to roll up their sleeves. Those kinds of actions of, I don't know, modeling just care. Yeah. Yes. Everyone's going to have difference of opinions. Yeah. That's not to say that everybody just kind of gathers along and moves forward together where there isn't difference of thoughts and opinions. Yeah. Of course there are. Yeah. But I think when we center ourselves around, I don't know, just that humanness that I see in the groups I interact with in this district, they model it.
It's one thing to say you live in a welcoming place. It's another thing to be the person who is welcoming them. I think Tom Kim is one of those people who welcomes. And part of welcoming is supporting, is enabling people to succeed, to do their best work, and to thrive. But those things don't happen just by virtue of saying we live in a welcoming place. They happen because we welcome and we enable and we empower people to succeed. I think he knows that because a host of people actively did that for him. As a result, he's able to do that for an entire community of students. Thanks for listening to Area Code Batavia. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. If you enjoyed this podcast, you should absolutely subscribe to the newsletter. Not only will we let you know when a new episode is out, but you'll also receive a weekly list of 5 concrete ways to belong in Batavia. Just click the link in the show notes. Most importantly, if you know someone who would love to hear this podcast, please share it with them. Word of mouth is the best way to grow our community and help more people feel like they belong in Batavia, Illinois. Area Code Batavia is produced by Area Code Audio. It's hosted and produced by me, Richard Clark, with additional production help from Jennifer Clark. Edited and mixed by Matt Linder.